All right. Welcome, listeners and viewers around the world. Thank you for joining us, whether you are on Facebook or YouTube. This is a Naxos live Q&A with guitarist, educator, researcher, reviver of lost repertoire, Christopher Mallett, who is currently coming to us live from UC Santa Cruz, where he teaches. He's also the founder of the California Conservatory of Music, which teaches in the Suzuki method for a variety of instruments, founded for guitar, but now teaching all sorts of things. Chris's new album is devoted to the guitar works of Justin Holland, who was a 19th century guitarist, composer, civil rights activist, and we'll be talking quite a bit about Holland today. However, we'll also be learning a little bit about Chris and his new album. Chris, congratulations on that album and its release just last week. How are you feeling about it? And thank you for joining us.
Oh, hey, Nick, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. It's just been a dream of mine for a really long time to get Justin Holland's music recorded and out to the public, some high quality recordings. And the only label that I thought it would be a great fit was Naxos. So I was really happy to finally see it released last week. The response has been great. Been having a lot of people reach out, and quite a few people actually have reached out and said it's their first time hearing Justin Holland's music as well. So that's been exciting because that was really kind of the main point of me wanting to play this music. I really enjoy the arrangements and they're fun to play. They're different, and we'll get into it later more. But just playing American music on a nylon string guitar with European forms is one of the coolest and strangest things to me, especially after spending like half of my life playing music by Giuliani and Soar and all that stuff. So having others reach out and say, this is the first time they've heard this, or how unusual it is to hear this, it's just really rewarding to me. And it's a huge reason why I wanted to do this project.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for bringing this rep to the world. And you're right, there is absolutely a canon of classical guitar music, a sort of standard rep, showpieces, sort of pedagogical pieces, you name it, the guitar has it. But I think a lot of people aren't exposed to the things that are, less well known. That don't find that audience via public radio or recordings or even online. It can be hard to find this stuff. So thank you for gathering it in one place. You mentioned that a lot of the pieces on your album by Holland are actually arrangements that he made of music that was originally by other people. We've got folk songs, other guitar compositions. Could you just sort of briefly characterize, for those who might not be familiar with the track list yet, what sorts of tunes can we expect if we are clicking on your album, picking it up in store?
Yeah, so I think you'll find a lot of the pieces. Justin Holland worked for a publisher called S. Brainerd and Sons, and his job was basically to arrange whatever was popular in the day, whether it be an American folk tune or an American song, like for instance, Home Sweet Home. Everyone knows that tune, right? It's like even my young students at the school I teach at, if I went like ba-da-dum, da-da-dum, they probably heard it in a cartoon or something. So, music like that. The Delta Kappa Epsilon March, which was the first piece on this broadcast and the first piece on the album. It's a Alfred Pease was a composer who was in the Delta Kappa Epsilon. So he composed that piece during his time there. I think it was founded at Yale, actually. And one really interesting thing about that piece is that, as far as I know, it's never been recorded by a guitarist or a pianist. I couldn't find any recording at all, So if you pick up the album, that'll be the first time anyone's ever heard that piece. And I don't, it's so cool to have a piece that's a couple hundred years old that's premiered. I'm really happy to also put that on the album. They made sure to put world premiere on several of the tunes. And it's cool because it's not just a world premiere on the guitar; it's a world premiere on anything. But yeah, so you'll find stuff like that. "'Tis the Last Rose of Summer's on there, very popular tune. The Maiden's Prayer. I made sure to add that. That was my wife's suggestion because I was reading through all of the Holland music, and she heard that, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, that's super popular." She grew up in Indonesia, and I think in Southeast Asia and also like China, the Maiden's Prayer is a very popular tune. So she was like, everyone used to play that on piano, so I had to play that. And yeah, so just a mixture of these really beautiful folk tunes from America and abroad. Justin Holland did arrange a lot of opera music as well, but I decided to wait on that. I just wanted to do more of the small folk tunes and college fight song type pieces on this album.
Sure. Well, the march that we heard at the start of this broadcast is certainly a rousing tune, and it's so cool, as you said, to have so many world premieres. And Justin Holland was just a person who was first and sort of exceptional in so many ways, and his music, same thing. So let's dive in a little bit on who he was, what this music represents in American history, because it's coming out of this very troubled period. He himself was a really fascinating person, very precocious, maybe even a prodigy. He was born free as an African American in Virginia, but he moved north. Things were not going so well after Nat Turner's uprising in the South. So he landed in Boston and Ohio and all these other places, and we'll talk about that. But could you just give us a brief overview of his life and music? You mentioned in the liner notes that he was also a civil rights activist. So I guess just paint us a little picture of who this person was.
Yeah, of course. So I think, his early childhood is mostly documented by an author named James Trotter, who wrote a book called Music and Some Highly Musical People, and he dedicated a chapter to Justin Holland. So a lot of the early accounts of Justin Holland's life are from this book. So he was born in Virginia. As you said, he was born free, very lucky, and quite unusual for that time. And he, I think, really showed signs of being musical from an early age. He didn't play guitar until much later, when he went to Boston, but he was given a book of like just not even just like words to like songs, And according to James Trotter, he would perch himself on a fence, and make up his own melodies to these words. That's how he spent his days, just trying to compose and think about music in his head of these words. And it's actually accounted that later on, he would encounter the actual melodies for some of these songs. He was making up his own melodies too, and he liked his own better. So maybe he was a composer from the start. But he was very determined. He would walk every Sunday to like a meeting lodge where it was kind of a community would get together of the free blacks, the whites in the community, and also some of the enslaved people. And they would just get together and sing together and make music together. So he would travel by himself, 7 miles each way every Sunday just to do that as a child. When he was 14, his parents passed away. There isn't really much about what happened. I can't find what happens, but something happened when he was 14. And that's when he decided to move to Boston just to try to, as you mentioned, the Nat Turner revolt was just a little bit before that. And I think that the government was just cracking down on educated black people in the South and in Virginia at that time. And Justin Holland was educated, so he wanted to get out of there. And he moved to Boston. And in Boston is where he discovered the guitar. He first met this guitarist named Mariano Perez, and this was at the Lions Theater. He was a Spanish guitarist, played some classical. And Justin Holland heard him and immediately fell in love with the guitar and just had to take lessons with him. So he got a guitar, started taking lessons with him, and kind of just really started growing fast as a musician. He then met another guitar teacher named Simon Nabel, who was part of a brass band called Ned Kendall's Brass Band, which was a really popular brass band at the time. And he took lessons with him, but Justin Holland really started kind of moving ahead with his studies when he studied with William Schubert, who was an accomplished arranger for the guitar and piano. And that's probably where Justin Holland got some of his inspiration to start arranging. And at the same time of taking his guitar lessons, he was also taking flute lessons as well. So he was very dedicated. You know, he would work during the day. He was obviously making pretty good money doing, because he wasn't teaching yet. He was doing something to make money because he was able to afford, you know, multiple guitar lessons a week and flute lessons. So he worked during the day, take his lessons in the evening, and practice at nighttime. He was very determined. And then after a few years in Boston is when he decided to go to Oberlin. So he wrote the president directly, appealing why he should be able to go to Oberlin. And Oberlin is, you know, one of the first schools to accept both blacks and whites together in one school. So it was a great opportunity for Justin Holland. It was also, if I'm not mistaken, the first maybe American conservatory, or one of the first conservatories in the States. So he went there and furthered along his musical education. And during that, he never finished at Oberlin, but during that time, he traveled down to Mexico to learn Spanish, came back, moved to Cleveland. And then in Cleveland is where he really started his professional life as a composer, arranger, teacher, and civil rights activist. And just to quickly touch on the civil rights activism, he was, which is really, it's like this guy did so much, you know, every time, you know, you read his story and then you're like, oh, cool. He got his way into Oberlin. Oh, wow. He went to Mexico. Oh, wow. He was the first black professional in Cleveland. Oh my gosh. He was part of the underground. I mean, it just keeps going and going. It's kind of mind blowing to me. But yeah, he was the secretary in charge of the Negro National Convention when it came to Cleveland. I think it was 1848, but sometime in the 1840s. The first one convened, I think, in Philadelphia in the 1830s. But when it came to Cleveland, he was the secretary of that convention. And then he was also the secretary of the convention when it convened in Rochester in 1854. And some accounts say that at one of these conventions, he even worked alongside Frederick Douglass, which I thought was pretty cool. Even if it's not true, you know, unfortunately, the best of records are not kept on people like Justin Holland and just African Americans in general. But I think, you know, the research showed that they were both at these conventions together. So I like to think that it's true. And on top of that, he was also a Freemason. So he fought really hard in the equality of the Black Freemasons. Unfortunately, the white Masons just never accepted the Black Freemasons. They didn't look at them as equals. So because Justin Holland learned so many languages, he spoke like French, Italian, German, Spanish, all these different languages. He was able to become kind of a representative of the Black Freemasons to several different countries, like France and Hungary and Germany and Peru. And they actually gained recognition in all of these countries thanks to the help of Justin Holland. And even with being recognized in all of these countries, still the white Freemasons still just said, nope, we're not going to consider you an equal, which I think is just really sad. And, you know, but he worked tirelessly to really kind of bring equality to Black Americans through music and civil rights activism. Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. What a CV, right?
Yeah, I know.
We should all be so energized and brilliant and all be polymaths. And yeah. Well, in any case, thank you for that quick overview. You know, that brings us to the fact that you now are reviving a lot of this music and really championing Holland. And, you know, this is something that's happened with other composers in the past, right, who had been overlooked a while. I'm thinking of the Chevalier de Saint-Georges, Joseph Boulogne, who was, you know, eventually lived a life as this sort of almost aristocratic figure in France, despite coming from a white French father and an enslaved mother in the Caribbean. And he was a champion fencer and a virtuoso violinist and a composer, and participated in running one of the first ticketed concert series. And his life is so unbelievable that there's a feature movie coming out about him. And, you know, Justin Holland is one of these figures who's a little bit like that, I feel. And it just brings me to the question, you know, given the fact that he's still relatively unknown, how did you encounter him and his music, and how did you decide to go about this project?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it was really a long time in the making, and I first discovered him a really long time ago. It was because my father, Keith Mallett, he's an artist, and he's the one who did the cover of the album. So that was pretty exciting to collaborate with him on that. But yeah, he's an artist, and he was doing a lot of research at the time. He kind of had an art series of these etchings and paintings with flowers in the front, and in the background were like musical notes etched in. He did like the Bach double concerto. He did some jazz ones. But anyways, he spent a lot of time browsing the Library of Congress website. This was early 2000s, so they didn't have all of the music up there. They kind of just had like a little sample page, and he came across a guitar piece, and he called me out, and he was like, "Hey, can you read through this? Let's see what this sounds like." So I read through it. I was like, "This is kind of cool. What is this?" I think it was the Carnival of Venice arrangement, actually, just like the first page or something. And then we looked at the name Justin Holland, and I was like, "That's weird. I never heard of this guy. Who's this?" And we looked him up, and yeah, we're like, "Oh, it's a Black classical guitarist." I had no idea that there was even like that there was a Black classical guitarist, and then a Black classical guitarist from the 19th century. It was just kind of this really kind of mind-blowing moment for both me and my dad. So we went through the Library of Congress website and just kind of were reading through everything they had, and realized that the only way to get the music would be to go to the Library of Congress. But at the time, there was no way I was going to get out to the library. I live in San Diego. It'd be hard to fly out to Washington, D.C. for the weekend just to pick up some music of a composer I just heard about. So I did some searching online, and found this guy named Donald Sauter. And he had this really old school kind of GeoCities looking website. I don't know if you remember GeoCities. Probably everybody out there who's listening is like, "What's GeoCities?" It's like this really old website blogging type of service from the early 2000s. And he cataloged like all of Holland's music. He was recording them just kind of on his computer, local amateur guitarist, but true lover of Justin Holland. So I reached out to him. I think he lived in Maryland, and I asked him, "Is there any way you can go to the Library of Congress and just copy everything that they have there for me?" I was like, "I love what you're doing. This is amazing. I'm obsessed already with this guy." And then he wrote back quickly and said, "Sure, I'll do it." He's like, "Just pay for the copying and the shipping, and I'll go do it for you." So I was like, "Wow." So I hadn't heard from him in like a month, and all of a sudden I got this delivery. It was like a sheet music stack, something like this big, of just these Justin Holland arrangements. And it was one of the coolest things ever, just to get all of these really old and new pieces that I had never heard before, and that a lot of people haven't heard before, and just sat down and started reading through it. And then, I went to Oberlin, studied undergrad, and just kind of put the Holland aside. It was time to study the classics, and I think don't regret it at all. I think it's really important to get all of that technique down and everything. And then I think it was after I finished at Yale, my dad and I went up to Cal State Northridge because the rest of Justin Holland's collection was there, and we picked it up there, and kind of just I carried that music around with me for years and years and years, until a couple of years ago when I started really getting a lot of requests to play it and perform it and stuff. So, but yeah, that's how I discovered him. It was kind of just by mistake.
All right. Well, shout out to the great people at the Library of Congress.
Yeah.
I know I went there one time and wound up somehow within 30 minutes holding the original manuscript of Charles Mingus's Black Saint and the Sinner Lady, which was just holding it in my hands, which was a real experience. But wow. In any case, we love to play music and video clips in these live Q&As. For anyone who is just joining us, by the way, this is the Naxos live Q&A with Christopher Mallett, classical guitarist and recent recording artist with the works of Justin Holland, who was a 19th century guitar composer, arranger, generally prolific and brilliant person who puts all of our productivities to shame. Let's hear a little bit more music right now by Justin Holland, as rendered by you, Chris. This is going to be a little clip of the Spanish fandango that Holland arranged from a popular source. And we're going to hear the end so that we can hear the virtuosic things that you have to do in there. So again, this is Justin Holland's arrangement of a Spanish fandango played by Christopher Mallett. New release on Naxos, out now. Incredible technical virtuosity there. Thank you, Chris, for making that sound happen.
Of course, yeah, I love that piece. It's has an open G tuning. It's if I threw a slide on, it would sound like something that would be played in the 1920s, in Mississippi or something. It's really cool. It's like pre-blues music and tons of harmonics. Justin Holland was a big proponent of the study of harmonics. He felt that a lot of the methods at the time did not really go in depth about harmonics and how they work on the guitar. So his methods, he made sure to really add in a lot of instruction and structure on how to play harmonics throughout the instrument. And I think in his comprehensive method and also his modern method as well. So.
Right. Some of these old instrumental methods that you can still find easily online are completely fascinating, just telling you to do the most amazing things that were not that common back then. So this is just a reminder to everyone watching that comments are open. You can comment on Facebook and YouTube, and there are a lot of people already delivering compliments to you over in the comment window here. Beautiful harmonics, I agree. Rojo Colorado here is, and I hope I'm honoring your name there and its pronunciation, but has played variations on La Traviata by Holland. Cool. And, people praising the sound of the recording too. I'm a little biased, obviously, but I think the recording sounds great too.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I recorded it here at UC Santa Cruz with William Coulter, amazing guitarist and producer and engineer. So I'm really happy with the way the sound turned out. I did record it on a modern instrument, but I wanted to have it sound, I didn't want it to sound like some virtuosic Spanish music. So I wanted to have the mics in a way where it still sounded kind of old, like some sort of old timey recording, but still clear.
Right. And there is video of you online. In fact, we're going to play a little bit of it later in the interview, where you are playing an actual 19th century guitar. It's smaller. It has this beautiful inlay. Those who stick with us will see it inevitably. But Yeah, could you tell us a little bit more about, what sorts of guitars Holland was playing? Like, what was the romantic guitar like in America, as far as we know?
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what he played. Some people say that he played a Martin, which I think Martin had moved from Vienna to America in the 19th century to start his own guitar shop because he studied with one of the famous masters out there. But some of the famous European makers were Lacote, Panormo, all of these guitarists. The ones I played in that video um, are not famous guitar makers at all. They're just kind of, I never heard of them. One is a Clem brothers or something like that, and the other one I forgot the name off the top of my head. But yeah, that's the type of guitar. There were parlor guitars. They used nylon strings or gut strings at the time, but they were pretty easy to play. So that's one thing that I found when playing these arrangements on a regular modern guitar. It's like some of these at first I was like, man, Justin Holland's hands must have been huge. But then I realized I was like, oh, wait a minute. They made these on a much smaller guitar. So I do have a 19th century replica. When I play it on there, I'm like, oh, okay, this feels a lot more comfortable. But I do really love the sound of the music on a modern instrument.
Yeah, absolutely. It adapts very well. Um, Very cool. It's not like we can do a gear check on Justin Holland on reverb.com or
Yeah.
anything. So it's good to hear this and to know that he was working with all sorts of stuff that was around at the time. So earlier you actually mentioned that, you did your undergrad at the same institution where Justin Holland studied for a while. And there's such a sense of history around Oberlin or around Yale, where you went to grad school, as one of the first, one of the first classical guitarists to go through Yale with African American heritage. Is that right?
Yeah, there have been a few. My duo partner Thomas Flippin also went to Yale. He went there 1 year before me. So, but we started our duo there. And same thing at Oberlin. It's just in the world of classical guitar, there just aren't a lot of African Americans playing, and we've done extensive work. Me and Thomas Flippin of Duo Noir in St. Louis. Through the St. Louis Guitar Society and Austin Guitar Society and Cleveland Guitar, all these guitar societies. So one thing that guitar societies do nowadays, which is really cool, a lot of them, is that in addition to doing their concert series, they do extensive community engagement work, and it's really because of the presidents of these societies. So William Ash and St. Louis, I think the first time I went out there was about 10 years ago. They had 2 or 3 schools that they were working with, and we were kind of went out there to jumpstart their community engagement stuff. And the last time we went out there, I think it was something like 30 schools that they're working with now. And going into these schools and seeing these kids play is pretty amazing, because they would not have an opportunity to play any classical guitar. They probably wouldn't even know what classical guitar is. And a lot of these kids do go on to study music. And at Oberlin right now, there's a student named Damien who is fantastic, but he started off in the Cleveland Guitar Society's community engagement program, just taking lessons like once a week after school or something like that, and he just fell in love with the guitar. And I was his mentor through the Guitar Foundation of America for a year, and we worked on a lot of Justin Holland and some other arrangements, but he got into Oberlin playing Justin Holland, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah. I actually think I've heard him live before, but that's
cool.
Beside the point.
Very cool. Yeah, great kid, great player. But I was lucky to study with 2 professors who were just very open-minded and just supportive of what their students want to do. A lot of people I came across, colleagues and just concert presenters, when I would mention Justin Holland, they'd be like, "Oh, his music it's not good." It's like they don't even give it a chance. It's like, well, maybe if you listen to someone play it, and put a lot of work into it, your mind would be changed, but a lot of people just wouldn't really give it the light of day. But Steve Aaron at Oberlin, who's my teacher there, he's supportive the entire time of this whole process of researching his music, and even coaching me on his music, reaching out and saying, like, can you listen to this? But Ben Verdery as well. I mean, I think Ben was one of the first American guitarists to write about, first like modern American guitarists to write about Justin Holland. I think he wrote a column about Justin Holland Guitar Player magazine in like the 80s. So, he was always kind of a big fan of Holland and always supported me playing his music, even if it was like in studio class or, at a concert or something like that. So, because really before 2020, I would sporadically play his music here and there, maybe one piece on this series, one piece there. But it wasn't until 2020 when everybody started reaching out saying, can you play Holland? Can you play Justin Holland? Can you like, we hear you have all this music. Can you play it here? So.
Right. It's, a shame that it takes world events of great consequence to make that happen, but at least now it's happening. So I want to put a pin in that thing about Holland being an incredible educator, because this is another thing where you're kind of stepping into a similar role. But first, a little bit more music. So for those who are just joining, welcome to the Naxos Live Q&A with Christopher Mallett, whose new album is out now, playing the arrangements and works of Justin Holland, 19th century American guitarist. We're talking about this album. You can stream it anywhere albums are available. You can buy it on a retail site in CD form, Archive Music, Amazon.com. Whatever your preference is, find this album now because it sounds incredible. And I'm not just going to tell, I'm going to show. Let's hear a little bit of Last Waltzes of a Madman, which is this incredible Holland piece where, Chris, I think we really hear, the sort of virtuosity that he had put into the music. So let's hear this piece now. Again, Last Waltzes of a Madman. All right, a little bit of Last Waltzes of a Madman. How did it feel to learn that one, Chris?
I love that one. that little chromatic line, that dee, da, da, I think that's kind of the going crazy madman type of thing there. That one actually it's I loved it to play it. And one thing though, it was credited as an original composition for many years, but it's actually an arrangement. So I was a little disappointed when I found that, because I was like, oh, cool, there's another surviving composition. But yeah, it's such a beautiful piece, and in many ways, you mentioned it's virtuosic. It's funny because virtuosity, I think, is not just playing fast scales, it's interpreting too. Because when I played through this, it's kind of easy to just kind of sight read through it. It's like, okay, it's not that bad on the guitar, but the virtuosity comes in of really trying to make it sound interesting. So I spent a lot of time, playing with tempos, because there are no tempo markings in this, and it's barely recorded. And I thought that kind of playing it slow kind of almost sounds a little bit more kind of demented, I guess you can say. So there are two versions too. This one's like the Last Waltz of a Madman, and there's also Last Waltz of a Lunatic, and people kind of just interchange the name. But I think Last Waltz of a Lunatic was a simplified version. So this one is an arrangement of Last Waltzes of a Madman, and it's just a cool little theme and variation.
Yeah, very cool. A lot of Holland's music has that sort of variations on a theme feel to it, even when it's not actually doing variations, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So we have a fair number of viewer and listener comments, which is really great. I'm actually going to enter one into the record now from Thomas Flippin, who asks, was it hard narrowing down the repertoire to fit on one album? Were there any pieces that were hard to leave out? And is there any plan for a volume 2?
That's not up to me. But yeah, in terms of narrowing down the repertoire, it was incredibly difficult. It's like, how much music can I fit? It's like, you can't be too long. You don't want it to be boring, but and you want to find all of the hits. So the way I did it was I basically told my wife, I was like, okay, you need to take off every night for the next week, and you're just going to sit down and listen to me play through everything that I have just on all this music. So I just sat there and we would go through it together, and we would talk about it, because she's also, my wife, she went to school for music and is a guitarist. She's not a professional guitarist anymore, but has an amazing ear. So we just sat down and kind of went through all of the music. It was easy to kind of select somewhat, because we took out, I didn't want to do any of the opera arrangements. I want that to be, if maybe that's a volume 2 or something. So there's a lot of opera arrangements, and then there are also a lot of pieces for 2 guitars, and quite a few pieces for guitar and voice. So those were easy to take out as well. So I was really just kind of going by the popular tunes of the day. And there were a few that I really wanted to, that I wasn't sure if I should put in or out. But one last minute piece that I threw in was Sweet Memories of Thee. And I don't know how I missed that one, but I was going through it again, and I played through it, and I was like, this one's awesome. I just loved it so much. And it's almost one of my favorites on the record now, and almost left it out. So yeah, I mean, just literally just sitting there and playing through them. It's funny because over the years, I played through the music quite a bit through the years, like over the past 20 years, I had all of it. But it wasn't really until a couple of years ago that maybe it was just because I sat down and was really studying them more. I was like, these are pretty amazing, like, these are really cool, and they're hard, man. They're just as hard as playing, like, a difficult Rigondi piece or something, maybe not as like crazy in terms of like the key changes and things like that, but in terms of the technique and just, the virtuosity, I think it's right on par with all of that stuff.
Absolutely. And there is actually a new Rigondi album out recently too. Shout out to David Starobin and Bridge Records. Oh, yeah. But we are currently, yeah, for those just joining, we're currently talking about Chris Mallett and his album of music by Justin Holland. Yeah. Got to keep that focus. And yeah, I don't mean to speak out of turn here, but if any of my coworkers who make these decisions are listening, there's talk of a volume 2 of this Justin Holland music here. So please note the by popular demand. So earlier you mentioned, on top of everything else, Justin Holland is an educator, and he doesn't necessarily go out of his way to cater to the children of the elite or anything. He's really trying to get out there in the community and reach people who might not otherwise have that much access to a guitar lesson. You actually have founded your own educational institution out there in California to do sort of a similar thing. So tell us a little bit about your work in that area. And I'm dying to know, do you teach Justin Holland's music to any of your students?
Of course. Of course I do. It's required. But yeah, so I started a school with my colleague and duo partner, Robert Miller. I have two duos, one Duo Noir with Thomas Flippen, and then Duo SF with Robert Miller. And we started the school in 2011. And the way that the school came about was the reason why I moved out to California, and he moved out there a little bit before me, worked at a Suzuki guitar school. Suzuki is like a method of teaching kids. To work with this guy, Frank Longe, who kind of founded the Suzuki method for the guitar and worked with Shinichi Suzuki. Then he passed away in 2010 or 2011. And then we started our own school from there, and started with 60 students and just kind of this small Suzuki guitar school. And then we started building up, and we had a lot of really good students, and kind of built up to around 400 guitar students. And at that point, we realized that because of the demand, it was just great seeing all these kids learn and how excited they were, but they had siblings and friends that wanted to play other instruments. So we opened it up to piano and violin and voice as well. And today we have 2 locations and about 45 teachers and over 1,000 students, which is pretty cool. It's just amazing to walk in to the school and just see these families, excited, and these kids excited to go into their lesson with their teacher. There's basically nothing that brings more joy. And we also have a lot of practice incentives for the students too. So, I love coming in and seeing kids with their trophies because they practiced 1 year in a row. It's like without missing a day. We just gave one student, she got her 7 years of practice trophy, which is just so amazing to me that the kids are so dedicated to and just love music so much that they take their guitars with them, everywhere, yeah. But but in terms of my students playing Holland's music, there's quite a few of my students that I've worked on Holland's music with. And there was a competition a couple of years ago where Justin Holland's music was the set piece. So definitely had all of my students do that. And a few of them continue to play his music. There's a few videos of my student Elle Davison playing Holland's music, Ever of Thee, and an Andante on YouTube. And another one of my students is learning the Carnival of Venice. So, and the great thing is that because Justin Holland was a teacher, a lot of his music can be worked on with, students who are a little bit newer to the instrument, all the way up to, like the most virtuosic students. So it's really amazing to be able to work on it with a wide range of levels.
Yeah, that's incredible. And so that leads me to ask about, the sort of technical demands of Holland's music generally. You've alluded to the fact that it's a wide range. Some of it, a student can get their hands around. Some, like that Carnival of Venice variation set, maybe not so much. But before we do, I actually want to give the people what they want, I assume, I hope, and actually play a little video of you. This is going to be the Rochester Schottische, named after Rochester, Michigan, which breaks my upstate New York heart. But let's see a little bit of this video. This is Christopher Mallett playing 19th century guitar in some music by Justin Holland.
That's a pop
Okay.
hit.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. This record of yours is all bangers, no skips, as we might say today, and Justin Holland probably didn't say back then. But so that does raise the question, what are some of the specific technical challenges of getting your hands around this music? I mean, you talked about the fact that guitar fretboards are just bigger now, but aside from that, what were some of the challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is that some of this music, I'm not sure if Holland actually performed, so um, I think you can tell which arrangements are made for his students because they do fit under the fretboard nicely, and I feel like okay, he probably went over this a lot with the student, got a lot of feedback. He was playing with them, probably duos and things like that. But some of the pieces, it's like you start playing it and you're like, oh my god, this is close to impossible. You gotta find ways to do it. Um, it's funny because the Carnival of Venice, it is extremely virtuosic and it's something like 10 variations and it takes you through the full gamut of what the guitar can do. There's, these quick sweeping arpeggios that almost sound reminiscent of like metal guitar today. It's like sweep picking or something like that. There's harmonics, extensive harmonics. There's playing up on the highest fret that you could play on the guitar, octaves, melodies that are on the top and in some melodies are in the middle voices. So it really takes you through the entire thing. And I look at Carnival of Venice as almost like a culmination of everything that he wrote about in his technique book. And then he wrote this piece saying, okay, here it is. This is, if you can play this piece, then you've kind of mastered my technique book and a lot of these techniques that I've gone over. But then there's pieces like Home Sweet Home, where it's just hard. It doesn't feel friendly to the left hand at all. There's no fingerings written in, so trying to find the right place. And that is probably my favorite arrangement on the album. I mentioned it earlier, I think, but it's just so cool to hear Home Sweet Home on the guitar. And then the melody is just always there the entire time. In the beginning, it's stated really clearly just as the theme. And then you go into that first variation where it's pre-ragtime, pre-stride, obviously, but it almost sounds reminiscent. The hand is just moving back and forth quickly, trying to hit these chords, but then go back down and play the bass and the chords and go back up and play the melody. Then the second variation is the melody is in the bass, and then he has like this beautiful arpeggio on top. So you have to really try to find a way to be able to play the low string plus the melody note, which is on the fifth string, but still keep the arpeggio going. So sometimes I'm kind of pushing my thumb through to create that, but sometimes I'm playing, with my index finger and then jumping to the arpeggio. So that was difficult. And then the final variation is almost, some of the counterpoint almost reminds me of Bach or something,
Mm-hmm.
So that one is one of the examples where I just don't know if he even tried it. I'm sure a lot of times, he's getting these assignments from the publisher and he's just like, okay, I'm gonna quickly write this out and get it to him because there's deadlines, there's this and that, probably giving him tons of stuff. I mean, he did over 300 arrangements. So he was working hard on them, but he probably didn't have time to sit down and perfectly finger everything,
Right. No, absolutely. And, I honestly can't ask for a better setup than what you've just given. Let's actually hear that now. This is you playing this very difficult arrangement of a very familiar tune. This is Home Sweet Home from Chris Mallett's album of music by Justin Holland. The sound you get out of that guitar, there are few words for that. So thank you for the music, Chris.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's just so fun. Every time I hear that, I get so excited because it's just such a strange thing to hear, a theme of variation on the classical guitar or any instrument. It's like, okay, let's take Home Sweet Home and do some theme of variation on it. It's just the coolest thing to me. It feels so American to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's obviously sort of a solo showpiece, and I'm kind of wondering about the extent to which this album for you was a little bit of a pandemic project, or maybe not.
I don't think it was a pandemic project, but it turned into one kind of.
Okay.
I'd always, like I mentioned, I'd been carrying around Holland's music with me forever. It's just people didn't seem to want to hear it. And then after the events of George Floyd and all that stuff, as I mentioned, people started reaching out. But this really awesome guitar collector up in the Bay Area, a little bit above San Francisco, Jeff Wells, whose guitars I was playing on in those videos. That Rochester Scottish video was played on the William Tilton guitar. But he has this extensive collection of old guitars, and then he had purchased a few American guitars, and then he was looking up American guitarists from the 19th century. And there's a couple, there's Charles Dorn and William Foden and people like that were a little bit after Justin Holland. But then he came across Justin Holland, and he wanted to find someone who was African-American to play it, and he just couldn't find anyone. But then someone recommended me to him, and he reached out, and I made those videos. And that was kind of the first step in kind of for me, for my personal revival of being interested in his music and trying to get it out there. And those everyone, were sharing those videos and really enjoyed them. And that's when I reached out to Naxos with those videos and said, I would love to get this, it's time to put this on the Naxos catalog. And they graciously said, we agree 100%, it's like, this is about time. So yeah, I mean, it was, and I recorded it during the pandemic and everything, but so yeah, it was a pandemic project, but really not on purpose.
Right. I think a lot of projects that wound up being pandemic projects that weren't supposed to be. So again, solo project, obviously a really impressive effort on your part, and I'm sure there were a million people behind the scenes you'd like to acknowledge, and there'll be time for that. But I want to ask, because you have two active duos right now, Duo Noir and Duo SF, how important is collaboration to you in general?
I love collaborating. I love bouncing ideas off of others. I love, especially with both of my duos. I mean, we commission music, and that's just another form of collaboration, and it's fun to commission someone when you have a duo partner, because you may disagree on some things, but you bring so many other things to the table, and some of those disagreements, are maybe my weak spot. So it's great that someone else feels like, like, oh, well, you don't like that, but I do. So get it in there. So it's really fun to work with composers and duos, and especially when you travel, it's fun to have someone to hang with, when you're playing concerts as well. But yeah, I've played in duos for a very long time. Both of these duos, I mean, for over 10 years, and they both offer so many different things. Right now with Duo SF, Robert and I are doing a project on commissioning composers to write pieces based on art. So we found a piece already written that's based on some paintings by Frida Kahlo. Then we commissioned this amazing Chilean composer to write a piece called, it's based on Diego Rivera's Pan American Unity mural, which is housed in San Francisco. And it's 5 movements. It's called Reborn. And there's 5 panels in the mural, and then there's 5 movements of the piece that kind of flow into each other continuously. So we're going to continue commissioning composers to write for different paintings. And when we play it live, it has this nice visual element because we have a projector that projects the images as we're playing them. So that's really cool. And then Thomas and I a couple years ago recorded an album of commissioned music that we commissioned from women composers, and we're still commissioning composers. We just premiered a piece by Natalie Joachim, amazing flute player and professor at I think Princeton, and we premiered her piece at the Guitar Foundation of America Festival in Indianapolis last summer, and it was a big hit. It's for 2 guitars and a backing track, and the backing track is her voice kind of layered on top of each other, saying, if I can hold it together. That was a pandemic project for sure. It's called Held Together, and it's about how she was trying to hold everything together during the pandemic. But so yeah, I mean, we're both commissioning music, but we're doing kind of different things with it. So it's just fun to be able to bounce ideas off of these 2 amazing musicians.
Right, absolutely. And, this isn't in any way diminishing the sort of traditional process of, learning standard rep or anything, because that's obviously very difficult, time intensive, can yield amazing results too. But, when people are working with a composer and commissioning, or looking back to rep that is not well known, maybe arranging it, editing it, having to do the research because no one else has before.
Yeah.
There's just so much more to it. And I guess I wonder, in general, is that sort of work, I guess, extra work or just sort of built-in cost of doing business, is that a thing that appeals to you in both earlier rep and in new rep?
Yeah, it does appeal to me. I love the idea of being able to dig in and find new things and study about composers that I don't know about, and just playing and introducing audiences to new music, I think is so exciting to me, and I love playing traditional music. I've played a lot of it, but there's already a lot of fantastic guitarists out there doing it, and I don't need to be another one. For me personally, I love the David Russells and Manuel Baruecos and all of those guitarists that are still touring this amazing music, and I go listen to it and I enjoy it. But when I play a concert, I want to bring something completely new to the audience, and it's kind of fun, like when you play a piece for 2 guitars and backing track at one of the biggest guitar festivals in the world. You kind of have no idea how it's going to be received, and I kind of like that feeling too. It's like, okay, we're going to play in front of like all of the best guitarists in the world and some of my biggest idols that I've grown up listening to and seeing, on TV and YouTube. And I'm going to play like one of the weirdest pieces that I've ever played for the first time. And so I think it's kind of thrilling for me to do that. And for the most part, it's always gets a good response because we're really careful making sure that we commission composers that we really, really like and that will write something that we feel is going to fit on the guitar,
All right. Well, I'll spare you the conventional stage anxiety and how you manage it question. In favor of, we're running up against, about the end of our time together. It's been so great to have you, but I do have one more question.
Okay.
Which is, this album is out in the world. People are encountering it. People are loving it, to judge by the comments here. And I guess I'm just wondering about near-term plans, long-term plans. What's next for you?
Yeah, some of the near-term plans with this album, I'm going to just continue doing promotion online and stuff like that. Hopefully get into the hands of lots of teachers around the country and maybe the world that can introduce this music to their students. So I'm going to be hoping to see more of this music played in the concert halls, maybe even by some of the legends as well. Someday we'll incorporate this music into the repertoire. Some long-term plans, after I finish some concerts with Duo Noir coming up in the next few months, I want to kind of focus my attention to performing this music live, probably on a 19th century replica guitar, Lacote replica. And there's already a few things set up. There's my good friend Kim Perlak, who she wrote the liner notes for this album, and she wrote part of her dissertation on Justin Holland and American music. Amazing scholar. She's the chair of guitar at Berklee College of Music. So we're planning something there, kind of doing maybe a Justin Holland 3-day residency where we're going to get historians to come in and talk about music at the time, perform Holland's music, give a talk on Justin Holland. And there's been a few other guitar societies already after just the album's only been out for a week, and quite a few people have already reached out about playing the music on their series. So long-term plans is to push this pretty hard and try to go into as many guitar societies and schools. The one thing I really like about this project and Holland's music is that it can be structured as a lecture recital type of situation, and it doesn't have to be just the traditional concert setting. I would love to play it to an audience and just kind of the entire time have questions and talk about his life and kind of just interludes of music throughout. So those are some of the plans. And then also I'll be waiting to hear from Naxos about Volume 2.
Yeah, well, no pressure on my brilliant colleagues, but it's fine. We can say what we want to say. It's free internet out there. So guitar societies out there, venues, concert presenters, take note. Lecture recitals are very much a possibility here, and good. So, Chris, just again, thank you so much for playing this, for bringing this music to us, for talking with us today, and to all of the viewers and listeners out there, thank you so much for tuning in, for your comments. It was great seeing all this love shown to this recording and to Chris's efforts. This album, Justin Holland, Works and Arrangements, is now featured on the homepage at archivemusic.com. If you would like to get a CD of it, if you would like to stream it, it's streaming everywhere. Find the album no matter how you find it, and no matter how what format you prefer for it, because it is going to be remembered as a classic, I predict. And, I would put money on that, but this is not a betting forum. So, so before I do anything illegal, let's close this and just say thank you to Chris. Is there anything you would like our audience to know before we sign off, Chris?
I just thank you, Nick, for doing your research on Justin Holland and for listening to all the tracks with such intent and getting ready for this conversation, and just a real serious, heartfelt thanks to all the folks in Naxos for giving me and Justin Holland the chance. I mentioned earlier, one reason why I wanted on Naxos is because Justin Holland will now be immortalized in this catalog of important composers for hopefully eternity. So now when people search Justin Holland, they will see it on the Naxos catalog. So thank you. Thank you to you and everyone in Naxos.
Well, you certainly made it easy to listen to. And on that note, let's actually, we've kind of been building toward it this whole time. We keep mentioning it, each of us. Let's listen now to that Carnival of Venice fantasy, putting words together here, as played by Chris Mallett on the new album, out now everywhere, Works and Arrangements by Justin Holland. This is a setting of a familiar tune. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, Nick.